everybody. Today we're here to talk about System Constellation and Healing Voices with Dr. Karl-Heinz Rauscher. And why don't we start with you telling us what's special? What's the special thing about symptom constellations?
Well, symptom constellation was starting with family constellation. Bert Hellinger was teaching it, and then I expanded that from the family realm into also the personal trauma realm and the personal trauma realm of former lives. So in the symptom constellation, I always start with the symptom or the disease or the problem, whatever it is, or problem in the relationship. And then from there, I try to find the real energetic cause of the problem. And this could be in 4 different regions. Basically, the main areas are, of course, family of origin. So that means that the unresolved trauma, which is always the background of a problem, the unresolved trauma is in the family of origin, meaning not the client experienced the trauma, but somebody else in the family, another family member, in a former generation normally, parents, grandparents, great-grandparents. And then the second is present family. This is the family you're founding in this life. That means all your important love partners, married or not, are part of that. And of course, all your children, also the dead and the living, so also the aborted and the miscarriage are part of that. Also, there could be a trauma causing the problem or the symptom or the disease. And then the third one is personal trauma. Of course, you could also experience personal trauma in this life, childhood, youth, or later. And some of those traumata you don't even remember. And it could still cause you the actual problem. And then the fourth one is also very important because it is after the family of origin. This fourth realm is the most frequent one. Like 35% of my clients show this background. And this is also personal trauma, but not in this life, in a former life. And in the symptom constellation, I consider all 4 realms of this, of all 4 areas. And this is the special thing about it. And I developed a so-called 4-column test, how in 2 or 3 minutes to find out in which area I have to search for the unresolved trauma. This is really a short test. And if you see later on in the chat, 4-column test, and this is a link to an article where I explain this in detail, how this functions. And if you're a facilitator for a while, you could very easily use that in your constellations. Well, this is basically what symptom constellation is. And of course, there are other specialties which became part of symptom constellations following my experience of the last 25 years.
Well, I've had my own experience with symptom constellation work, and it was very interesting to watch you do the detective work that's necessary to reveal what's unknown or invisible. Can you tell us more about the detective work that you do in the system constellations?
Yeah, this is one of the most important tools of symptom constellations. I never stop because somebody is not informed about the past. For example, everybody, of course, does a family tree before they come to my office, or do an online constellation with me. But as probably most of you know, there are borders. There could be this situation that all the older ones are already dead, or they don't want to talk, or there is a secret. Very often there is a secret in families. And then you do a constellation and you see there is somewhere there is the unresolved trauma. It's clear, but nobody knows about it, and nobody talks about it. And if I ask, do you know something about the grandparents or great-grandparents, and some people say, no, I have no idea. I tried to get some information, but nobody knows. So we work with the unknown then. And so I call this detective work, because you are then working with the unknown. And some people stop there and say, well, if you don't know, we cannot do anything, but that's not true. You have the possibility to find out what's really going on. And so I developed a very structured tools how to work with the unknown. And the basic tool is what I call test position, a test position. So there is, for example, a question you have. For example, there is a trauma, and if you go to the family of origin and it's on the father's side, the father maybe has some connection to the trauma, but it's not clear whether it might be older. So maybe it happened in the generational level of the grandparents or the great-grandparents. And so I do test positions. I bring the parents of the father, in this case, just to test whether they have a connection to the original trauma. And one thing is that I always, if I work with family constellations, that I always bring a position for the unknown, unresolved trauma, because it's there, even if you don't know where it is. But I bring the position, and then I see which generation has a connection to that. And if the father has a connection, that does not mean that it happened in his lifetime. So I go one generation back and bring grandparents, both grandfather and grandmother, to see whether they are connected. And they show, this is shown in the constellation. And if they are connected, and I'm not sure, it's still not clear what it was, and maybe the grandmother shows a connection, I bring her parents, the great-grandparents, to see whether the trauma might be older. And so I do this until there is a generation who shows not to be connected with it. And then I know, okay, this is then, in this case, for example, the grandmother. And then I ask, of course, what happened there? What happened there? And if you still don't know, I try to find out what could be, the most important possible trauma. For example, yesterday I had a case where there was a trauma affected with the grandmother, and but nobody knew what it was. And I asked then, maybe did she have a first husband who died? Maybe. No knowledge about it. So okay, I try, possible first test position, possible first husband or first love, and it showed that she had a first love, and that this man died, obviously. And I learned this from the constellation, and you can find out with test positions. And very often, always if I work with unresolved trauma in past lives, I, of course, this is then all detective work, and I always work with test positions. That means I bring the one the client was in the former life. This one has to be there, and then the trauma. There's always a trauma. And then the question is then, is it man-made or not? So to find this out, I bring a test position called perpetrator. If there's a perpetrator and the perpetrator shows to be there and has a connection to the trauma, then it was man-made. The next question is, when the perpetrator is there, was it a single perpetrator, or was it a perpetrator system, like with people in the background giving orders, something like this? So I just bring them as a test position, and then I learn about the situation. And if you do this often, you feel you feel comfortable with that. You just go to until the situation where you know what happened. Or test position, was somebody in a former life, was it a man or was it a woman? Was the perpetrator, if there is one, a man or a woman? Or if the perpetrator goes away, says, "No, I'm not here. This is not my area." Then you know it's it's not caused by humans. That means you have then other possibilities. The next question is, was it maybe a disease? So I bring test position disease, and if it's a disease, it connects to the one who died there. Or if it's not a disease, I say, okay, what could it be? A natural disaster, and then you test this. Was it a storm? Was it an earthquake? You can test all those things, and this is a very important part of symptom constellations. I almost never stop before I know what's going on. Also in a family of origin, or trauma in your life, your childhood, for example. If the 4-column test shows the unresolved trauma is there, you experience it yourself. Of course, then I ask, what do you remember? Tell me all the traumata you know about what you went through in your life. But if the one is not there, the real trauma who causes the actual problem, I do test positions. I do, okay, let's see if you don't, it could be in an early baby stage or during birth. So I bring the birth of this client. And if the birth connects to the unresolved trauma, which is already as a position in the constellation, then I know. And then we track the unresolved trauma down. The most important test position is a part of the client's soul who might be still frozen in the unresolved trauma, because this is often the case.
So this process of using the 4-column test and then the test positions really allows you to hone in on the issue very specifically. And what it makes me wonder is, when you do the 4-column test, have you found that the problem reaches across one or two or more domains?
Yes, seldom, but those cases are there. There is the possibility that you have two energetic backgrounds to different areas, the same strength in the same time. Therefore, if the column test, and always start with the family of origin, shows, for example, the right arm goes out to the, connects to the problem, and I know this father's side, or the other side is mother's side, both sides. If there is a connection like this, I never start with the column test, 4-column test. I do all the other 3 options also, because there could be also a second. And just one time, I had the case that there were 3 different traumata in 3 different areas connecting to the disease or the problem or
Wow.
in this case. This was but only one time. So this was, in this case, it was one in personal trauma, sexual abuse in this case. Then it was at the same time in a former life, and then it was also in the family of origin. And then we had to do 3 constellations. We did the second after 2 or 3 weeks, and we waited. But then you could see it. The problem was just, or the disease was going down slowly, but still holding up maybe 40 or 50%. The next time we went down to 1/3, and then after the 3rd constellation, it went away. And the client felt it. And but this is only one, in 20 years, but the two, there are two connections. It's more often.
Right.
Or not often, but every now and then.
Right. Okay. And now, can you tell us what is the source of the shamanic healing energy that is involved with the healing voices?
Yeah, this is, well, the shamanic work I do, I combine it with symptom constellations, and it brings the healing to another much higher level than without shamanic work. And it's not always necessary, but I can say 95% of my symptom constellations have a shamanic part at the end. And I call this shamanic work healing voices, because the voices and sounds are an important part of that. And the source of that, of those shamanic healing powers, is the universe. It is. I cannot tell you anything else. It is the universe, meaning those shamanic healing powers are everywhere all the time. They are around us, in us, and the source is the whole thing, the whole universe. It is, going back to the really source of life, really. And the nice thing and the wonderful thing is that those, obviously, the universe is on our side. That means those shamanic healing powers are on our side. They want to help us. They are ready to help us if we know how to invite them, and they are powerful. And so they need two prerequisites to be effective. They don't work without those things. One is total yes of the client, and the second is that they need somebody who is able and willing to be the channel for this. And I do this in the constellations, and they do, and those healing energies. They do really, the work. They complete the healing, because they free the souls of those human beings who experienced the trauma way back. Their souls are still often still frozen in the trauma, and as long as they are frozen in the trauma, there is no real peace in the system. And the shamanic healing powers can liberate them, and often do this. And of course, this is what I know from my work, and I'm sure I know that all the shamans of this world, have the same source. They just use other ways to bring to bring them to the ones who need the healing. So with all the different traditions they use, which were developed over hundreds of years or thousands of years, but the source is the same. There's no other source of healing.
Well, I can say from my own experience that the detective work that uncovered that the trauma was from a different lifetime, in combination with the healing voices at the end, really changed things dramatically for me in an experience that I'd been coping with for most of my life. So it was a remarkable thing. Well, thank you. Anything else you want to add right now about system constellations and healing voices?
Well, it is an honor for me that I am able and called to do this work. It is an everyday pleasure. It is a lot of work. It needs a lot of energy, but it also brings energy. And it brings so much wisdom over time about the human condition. And this is never ending. Understanding insights are never ending. And also what I experience in myself, it is always another layer of well-being possible. If you are connected and feel connected with the world, and also those healing powers, because then you know you're on the right spot and the universe is on our side, and this brings peace. Brings peace.